Posse videos. Remember those? Ah, pretty cool. All the way across the country. That thing made them famous. They're working on another one, so we're trying to get them on. The holdup on the Big Bait Posse video is I helped them promote the first one, and they promised me I could be in the second one, and I haven't caught a fish big enough to be in the video. So that's why we haven't seen Big Bait Posse 2, right?
Still waiting on them.
Still waiting on me, but I'm going to go to Clear Lake with his brother Paulie, and they said they'll guarantee they'll get me locked in on the deal. Guys, always fun. He's got a great new swim bait he's manufacturing. If you guys didn't check those out, really awesome looking bait. You're going to need to put those in your tackle box. Please welcome little bro, Shaun Bailey.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Ken. Well, I guess everybody probably wants to talk about Havasu. You know, Havasu is a pretty unique fishery. As Kent was saying, they put what he called road hazards in lake. What it is just habitat. And we all have heard of quagga mussels, and the quagga mussels just stick to that stuff like glue. So one of the most repeated questions that I get asked about Havasu is, how do you fish those cages? How do you fish those habitats? Every time I throw near one, I break a fish off, or I break my lure off, And so, we've kind of developed a little bit of a way to fish them to where you're not breaking so many fish off. And, it really all depends on what you're throwing and what you're doing. But with those cages, what I found is it's all about angles. They're big, giant, square boxes, and they all have a flat side on them. And everybody kind of just like randomly sees a habitat out here, and your first instinct is to just throw your lure over by it and hope that you get a bite. But in actuality, all those fish use those sides as like ambush spots. So every cage to me is like 4 spots, because everybody else is making one cast over the top of it. If they don't get a bite, they keep going. And there's hundreds and hundreds of cages, and what makes them good and makes them bad, it's hard to figure out. It's pretty much placement. But the approach to fishing them is, I think I have 4 spots when I come up on a cage. And I like to fish all the sides. Good. A cage is, they're man-made habitats in Havasu. They build them up. They make these big square boxes out of PVC, and then they line them with like that orange fencing stuff. Oh yeah, it's legal. The state does it. And it's like one of the deals that they did to bring the lake back. So, there's four spots on one cage. So it's all about the angle. If I see a cage out here and I know it's a good cage in a good area, I've got 4 spots. So you just have to position your boat and make the cast down the side of each one. And the way to eliminate how many sides to fish in one is, for me, is the sun angle on Havasu. The sun's here, and there's a cage here with 4 sides. They're obviously going to get on the side that's shaded. So you can kind of break it down a little quicker than just kind of fishing hundreds of cages, every side at a time. Certain times of the day, it'll be noon, 1 o'clock, and the sun's really high. When it's like that, you got to fish all 4 sides because there's not really a shaded side. But in the afternoons, you can kind of just eliminate 3 sides and just fish the one side. And you can literally go around the lake fishing the back side, sunny side of the cages and pick them off. And, lots of guys, I fished with Paul in a tournament, we were fishing brush piles, and you can throw on one side and not get a bite, and you throw on this side and get a bite. And guys don't pick up on why. And it's all that angle of where those fish want to be positioned according to the sun. So for me, I just eliminate a lot of trial and error, and I just try not to waste as much time as I can and fish the good side of the cage. A lot of guys break fish off. They like to throw into the cages. The cages have like holes on top, so the fish can get in and out. And if you throw in there, you'll never get a fish out. So I really, really avoid getting my lure anywhere inside that cage and, keeping it on the outside so your landing ratio goes up tremendously. With the swim bait, we got the new swim bait coming out, and it's got a treble hook on the bottom of it, and that alone you don't want to be rubbing on cages, So what I'll do is I'll take the swim bait, find the angle, cast it out, let it sink on the shady side, and you just wind it by the side of it, and that way you're not touching the cage, you're not worried about losing your lures, and when you hook a fish, you'll actually land it. And the quagga mussels, they're not only liking to attach to the cages, it's the brush piles, it's any piece of wood, it's all the structure. So 7 years ago, 6 years ago, there's no quagga mussels. I used to be able to throw a worm inside of one of those cages, hook a fish, and just rip them right out and land it every day of the week. But now you can't do it. So it's really changed my approach on Havasu the last 4 or 5 years. I've really, like Kent said, I got tired of, losing $50 in crankbaits a day just because I thought in my mind I had to touch that cage. Now that the fish are relating to them on a consistent basis, I mean, every day of the week you can just target cages. Winter, summer, fall, they use them all times a year. So the way to eliminate wasting time is to fish the most productive side. Same with the brush piles on Havasu. They have thousands and thousands of them. The thing with the brush piles on Havasu is that the state, the way they build them is they roll them up into a bundle, and then they tie it with some sort of tie, and then they put it in a lake. Well, that brush pile is good and still in a bundle for about a year, year and a half. And then what happens is whatever they use to tie it breaks down in the water, opens up, and then that brush pile just lays flat on the bottom. So if I had a brush pile that, say, I've been catching fish off of for 2.5 years, 1 year I may be able to go there. I may go there, and that brush pile is gone. And I'm like, I've been catching fish here for 2.5 years. How come I can't get any fish here? So you go up and you look, and that brush pile is opened up, and it's on the bottom. So what I do is I stay on top of the new stuff. They're constantly putting brush piles in that lake. They have an operation where they build them right on the lake, and they have a huge boat, and they drive around, and they dump them in certain spots. So a lot of my days are wasted days. To me, I don't fish. I go around and I look for the newer brush piles, and I kind of have to eliminate my old ones. It's hard to do because you're so used to, I've come to this brush pile and I've caught a wormfish off this every day of the week for years and years, and all of a sudden you can't. So the lake is constantly changing with the mussels and the brush piles and stuff like that. So you really just have to stay on it and stay on the good cages and the good brush piles. The good cages are the ones that are in good areas. There's thousands and thousands of cages there, and it's kind of intimidating if you've never been there and you show up and you're like, look at all this structure. How do I know which one's the good one? Well, if you know the lake a little bit and you spend a little bit of time out there, you can slowly start to figure it out. And different times of years, different cages are better. They like to put those cages out in the centers of the big bays, and you pull up and there's 40 cages that you can actually see the tops of everywhere, and you're like, well, where do I start? If it's dead of winter, I don't even touch the shallow ones. I just stay way out in the middle and fish the offshore ones. And you'll notice as it gets more and more into like pre-spawn time, those fish will move shallower and shallower, and they'll start relocating cages. And Havasu has big groups of fish, and there won't be just one fish in a cage. I dive in the summer and I check them all out, and you can go in the cages and like move them around a little bit. I mean, some of them are 15 feet tall, and there'll be 40 fish come out of one cage. And you could be on top of it on your trolling motor looking down, and you don't see a single one. So it's hard to find the productive ones. The way you do it is just trial and error and figuring out times a year where the fish are. Most of the times the fish on Havasu are generally shallow. That's my rule of thumb, is that you don't ever need to fish deeper than 8 foot on Lake Havasu. There's just no reason to. Except for in the dead of winter, they kind of get on the wood a little bit and they move out in the middle of the lake. So, I mean, you have to figure it out a little bit, but there's a lot of easy ways for a guy who's never been to Havasu to show up and break down those situations where the cages and the brush piles and all that, and not waste your whole day, pitching a drop shot or something, at a cage. You can kind of just go through and visually look and know what's the good stuff. You had a question? Sorry? In the summertime, yeah, the water's super warm. I just go swim in and stuff, no tournaments and stuff, and check it out. No, it's fresh water. Yeah, it's quagga mussels. We got them in all the lakes around, all the San Diego lakes and stuff have them now. It's crazy.
How far out of the habitat would you sit on a regular day?
That's a great question. If it's super, super windy out, or you have a little bit of stained water, you can get pretty close to those cages. But on a calm, glassy day at Lake Havasu, I mean, you can see the bottom in 25 feet, easily. I mean, you can see crawdads crawling around. So it's a great point. As far off as you can be is the longest cast you can possibly make to present to that fish. is what I try to do. I try to stay as super far away from everything as I can. Some of them, yeah. Yeah, some of them. The average cage is about an 8-foot box. 8 foot on top, 8 foot tall, just a big box. And the way they have them created is they have levels inside of them. They have like areas for fish to swim in and out of the cage. But when you get down in that cage, they open up quite a bit. And there's a lot of room in there. And so you would never think that there'd be 40 fish sitting, you know, from me to you right there, and I had no idea. They're all inside of it. So those fish will come out and feed on a regular basis. And you can time certain areas, you can time when these fish come out and feed. You can sit on a cage and throw a worm at it for a couple hours and not get any bites, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, it got feeding time, happened to be, you know, 2 o'clock or whatever, and you can catch 15, 18, 20 fish off one cage. And then all of a sudden they just go back inside that cage. So they like to live in them and use them. That's why I always try to fish with the sun behind my back, yeah. Or, you know, if I'm off to the side of a cage and I'm approaching a group of them and I know the sun's here, I just hit the backside of all the cages, you know. Like I said, if it's noon or 1 o'clock, you got to fish a few more sides because the sun's so high. They're generally inside at that time. Mm-hmm. Did you have something? Okay. That's pretty much, you know, the best way to approach the cages on Havasu. That's obviously not the only way we do good. We do a lot of different stuff to catch fish there. The swim bait thing has probably been the most productive thing for me over the last couple of years. That's part of the reason why I moved there. This fish had never really seen a swim bait about 7 years ago when I moved there. So it was one of the determining factors for me to get out of there is because they bit it so well. And it's just one of those things that those fish over there just don't get pressured a lot by swim baits. They have been more and more lately. Go ahead, Paul. You know, we have thrown the Alabama rig quite a bit. Last year it worked pretty well. It seems like on Havasu that it's a real cold water presentation. The fish really don't get into it really good until the water gets like 55. And it seems like from December, January, even some February, it will catch fish. And it's a great way to catch them there. The last couple weeks we've been catching stripers on it. We have a new bait out for the Alabama rig, and so we've been out testing it quite a bit. And the bass, we've been catching some bass, but it's just the water's still like in the mid-60s. And I'd give it like another 3 or 4 weeks, you know, and let the water cool down, and it'll be a productive way to catch fish there, for sure. You know, areas to fish an Alabama rig on Lake Havasu, you know, there's so many cages, like we were saying, there's so many areas to snag and lose. I mean, you don't want to spend all the money on all these swim baits and Alabama rig and go out there and throw it and hang it up on a cage, you know. So we tend to stay away from the cages when we fish Alabama rigs. I like to fish them high in the water column there. There's not a lot of productive deep water on Havasu. Like I said before, 90% of my fishing is in 8 feet of water or less. The river channel on Havasu is just completely silted out right now. There's no hard bottom out in the middle. All the old like ledges and river channel breaks, they're all silted in. So the middle of the lake's pretty useless, unless you're fishing about all the way through January. But then I'm just fishing jigs in outside trees. But I'm not fishing hard bottom per se. So the Alabama rig, my whole deal is fishing coves and bays without cages in it. And you obviously have to stay on top of the bait. You know, you can fish areas that have bait in it, and you'll murder them on this. And you go to the next cove and there's no bait, you don't catch no fish. The fish on Havasu like to school up in a big way. I don't think people realize how big a schools run around on Lake Havasu. Good? Yes, they both do, and they school together. I mean, a lot of lakes, the spots will stay with the spots, and the smallmouth will stay with the smallmouth, and the largemouth do their own deal. On Havasu, it's such a unique fishery. I had a school last week that every other cast, it was a largemouth, smallmouth, and it just blew my mind that they were interacting that way together. People think, you know, one species is going to hurt the lake as opposed to the other, and these two species are coinciding together so well. And they love the brush piles, they love the cages, and there's no real rhyme or reason. I can't really say, oh, I'm going to go fish for smallmouth today, because there's a good chance that I'm going to catch largemouth off all the same stuff that I'm going to try and catch smallmouth off of. So you really don't have to, per se, I'm going to target this species on Havasu. Havasu is just you take whatever you get because you never know. They're all in the exact same places that they should be. Certain times of year it may be different. Early in the spawn, the smallmouth are all going to congregate to the more flat areas with the pea rock and stuff like that, and the largemouth are going to stay in the cages and on the brush piles and stuff, and they're going to stay there late until they bed. So there's a time when you can kind of target them and separate the two, but 90% of the time you're fishing for the same fish. You just don't know what you're going to get.